Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Letitia Wells, a former Government of Canada employee who has spoken out against systemic racism. As APTN News' Brett Forrester has been reporting, Letitia, who is Blackfoot and a student at the University of Calgary, is one of the lead plaintiffs in a proposed class action lawsuit alleging widespread discrimination and a climate of fear and intimidation amongst the workforce. Letitia, thanks so much for being with us this week.
Thank you for having me.
For starters, I guess, can you just tell us a bit about your career with the federal government?
I was employed as a part-time contractor with Indian Oil and Gas Canada beginning in September of 2015. I had been a public service servant for almost, 5 years on and off. And I had a great relationship with them up until October of 2019, when I believe I was targeted for racism. From October of 2019, I left on sick leave in January of 2020, never returning. My contract was ended, never giving a reason why.
I mean, I guess I think I know quite a bit about the government, but I'm not familiar really with Indian Oil and Gas. Can you tell us a bit about that department?
Indian Oil and Gas Canada is a very specialized organization within the government. They process all of the royalties or all of the oil and gas subsurface and surface agreements for First Nations across Canada that have development on their land. And they manage that as a, advocacy group to get the best deal. They have a mandate to provide excellent service and management, and I truly believe that they're failing at that mandate. They are not providing excellent service, nor are they treating their employees with equality as internal government employees under a specialized Indigenous organization.
Sounds rather important. I guess maybe taking a little step back on what led you to wanting to work in the civil service?
What led me to work into the civil service is I have a finance background of about 12 years, and I worked in the nonprofit organization. And in 2014, when we fell into a little bit of a recession, I decided to do a career change. I went to an oil and gas petroleum fast track program. After graduating, I was invited by Strader Crowfoot to apply within the Government of Canada through SAIT. I had met him as a meter greeter, and from there on, that's where the dialogue started. So Strader Crowfoot invited me to apply, and I was a successful candidate in moving forward with that.
I guess, what did you what did you believe that you could make a difference in the departments that govern Indigenous people in this country?
I honestly, to be quite honest, I had to work because I was a student returning to, actually going to the University of Calgary. I was just trying to get out of poverty. I was working 30 hours a week with the government while working on 2 degrees, fleeing a domestic violent relationship. They supported me in that. As a public servant and through my education, I realized that I have an accountability and a responsibility. So I believed I could contribute changes within the government as an employee to help them achieve reconciliation. I believe being in a global seat as Indian Oil and Gas Canada sits, they are one of the only businesses that manage oil and gas for First Nations, that they are in a position to lead reconciliation and create real systemic changes within the government.
Wow, that was a lot you had going on. Congrats to you for what you were able to do. Did you feel like the work you were doing was making a difference?
Absolutely. I take pride in what I do everywhere I go, because that's what my late father, Franklin Wells, raised me to be, was even somebody as a janitor to take pride in that, no matter what you do in life. So as I started unraveling my trauma going to school, being a public servant, I took a lot of pride in that. I just wanted to make a difference. I just wanted to make a difference as a public servant who had such profound, rich experience and was gaining knowledge regarding reconciliation, that I could see where they were failing at it. I could see where systemic racism was in the heart of its constitution, per se, and I could see the resistance of how leadership does not want to make those changes. They are set on holding up systemic standards rather than trying to head on a huge problem within the government, the federal government, and that's systemic racism, dysfunctional behavior, and institutionalization of our people.
And, you know, I want to throw another kudos out to Brett Forrester here for all of his reporting on this, because Indian Oil and Gas isn't the only place within the federal public service that Indigenous people were facing this type of action. Do you think there's a place for Indigenous people to work in the federal government, or do you feel the two are just not compatible?
I will honestly answer that. I don't feel the two are compatible after researching this and looking and analyzing it very deeply, especially after the call out for the toxicness. It seems like the government has gotten worse with the treatment, and they are pressuring a lot of fear tactics, where the fear of reprisal is rising. And so I don't think that true, authentic Indigenous peoples will ever move forward within the federal government. I don't think we have a chance in hell to ever reach to the top level of government agencies or institutions.
What does that say to you?
That says to me, get out while you can, because it's not worth the health or the mental health that they put you through. You go through a lot of health risks, mentally, physically, emotionally. You question yourself a lot as an Indigenous person if you're worthy. One of the interviews that I did across Canada, one of the statements that ex-employee made was very profound, and I have to agree with that. And I'm going to share this with you today, and that is, the government is so good at making Indigenous, authentic people feel so worthless that we are afraid to apply for work after they're done with us. I thought about that statement for a long time, and I agree with it 100% today.
That is a pretty awful statement indeed. Letitia, we've got much more to talk about here, but we're just going to step aside for a quick break. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Leticia Wells, and we've been discussing the racism she's experienced while working as a civil servant with the federal government. Indian Oil and Gas was the agency. Leticia, what was work like when you first started on the job?
It was a fantastic opening and welcoming into Indian Oil and Gas Canada. I was treated with respect. I was welcomed in. I had some fantastic Indigenous trainers who trained me in my position. I seen a division immediately between Indigenous and non-Indigenous staff. When I look back now, there was an individual that introduced me to everyone. For privacy reasons, I'll keep her name anonymous. But I actually witnessed now what I thought was, I couldn't understand what it was, but now I know it was fear. When she was introducing me around, especially to non-Indigenous people, she had a very paternalistic relationship with her superiors. And I questioned that. And so I'm an observer, so I observed them for quite some time. And like I said, I had a great relationship with them for up until October of 2019. None of the systemic racism or targets fell to me until then.
So what changed in 2019?
I got a new manager is what changed. I had, in the time, I've been probably managed by 8 different managers. And in that time, there was a high turnover for the acting or for the manager position in lands. And what they did was a rotating service. And so internal staff had come to cover those roles within staggering periods of time. And so in September of 2019, a non-Native individual had become my manager, who then I was appointed into a promotion for a land analyst position. And in that role, I was provided absolutely no training. I was asked to self-teach myself from a binder. When I had come back to ask them that I don't learn through self-taught, through reading a binder, I'm an apprentice learner. I learn in a lecture setting. That's why I'm at the University of Calgary in a lecture setting. At that time, my direct supervisor had criticized me and called me stupid for not being able to learn that way. And so it was a non-Native manager that had come in that I believe that targeted me. And from the pushback of the training, my first warning came in October of 2019. They told me somebody was watching me. They told me that this person was reporting me, but they never told me who. I was then told that I had to report on when to go to the bathroom, when to come back. I was a part-time worker doing classes in between while I was working. It got so bad that they started intentionally making me late for one of my law classes. When they knew I had to be out on a certain time, they would pull me in for a quick 2 minutes. That quick 2 minutes turned into 15, 20 minutes, which was my travel time to class. So it got very heavy from October of 2019 with multiple verbal warnings that I got. And in the end, all these warnings ended with, it's not official, we're on your side. That to me is very manipulative as a leader, to be able to step in and say, look, we put somebody on you, we're watching you, but we're on your side. And that is just part of the poisonous that I went through. It got so bad by the time of January of 2020 that I left on sick leave because I could no longer handle the microaggressions or the micromanagements that were coming my way. I then approached Strader Crowfoot to break an Indigenous deal he made with me. And from that point, he is the one who called in HR. And that is when HR came in with their grievance processes. And through those grievance processes, it was too traumatic to keep going and repeating my story over and over again to systems that didn't understand intergenerational trauma or trauma in general of Indigenous peoples. And so I didn't proceed further with any of their grievance. After the Center of Integrity for Ethics, I didn't further grieve anything because the processes there, they work, I feel, on persuading you away from what you think you went through.
Like you say, you know, you're trying to go to school, you're a survivor of all this trauma as well, having to go off on leave. What was the effect of all of this on your personal life?
I actually left on sick leave because I began having suicidal thoughts. I am a survivor of deep-rooted sexual, emotional, physical, and psychological traumas. And this was well known to Indian Oil and Gas Canada, with my most recent trauma being domestic violence that I fled. The toll that it took on me was I immediately reached out for my therapist to book an appointment because I had understood that these thoughts were coming back and I needed assistance with working through them. It's not what's wrong with me, it's what's happened to me. So every time traumatic events happen to me, it chips away at my value even more and more, and it takes that much more away from who I am. And so I remember on April 16th, after 16 days of them ending my contract, Strader Crowfoot had sent me a text, and it was it was called The Sound of Failure. And underneath it was a Snoopy cartoon, and it said, a good laughter helps anybody through anything that they're going. On that day, was one of the days that it took a toll out of me. I couldn't understand why a CEO was reaching out to me 16 days after letting me go, calling me a failure. I actually sat and it cut deep. That cut really, really deep to me. I have fought Indigenous men my whole life, and the Indian Act, the Constitution, the oppressive systems that have been there, I've fought them my whole life in trying to gain respect in who I am. And unfortunately, on that day, I felt defeated. And I actually reached out to somebody from Indian Oil and Gas, and she stayed on the phone with me till 3:30 in the morning, so I wouldn't be left alone with my thoughts. And so I thank her very much to this day. From that, I have realized that my life is too important now to allow anybody to take me down that way again. And I now realize that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't something that I did. It's something that they tried to destroy me. They tried everything in their power. They did kill my spirit. They emotionally killed my spirit, where I felt that my life was no longer worthy of moving forward. And I fought that process. I fought those thoughts. And that is what's given me the strength. And what I've learned to recover from that is I will no longer ever have those thoughts again, because they've given me the strength to overcome that.
Well, Letitia, you sound like a strong survivor here today. You know, you're not the only one who's part of this class action, proposed class action from Indian Oil and Gas. So what were some of the things you were seeing other employees experience?
Well, I entered this never ever realizing what it was going to spiral into. I remember that the day Brett Forrester called me and asked me to come out, and said he had interviewed several people, but nobody was willing to come out with their name because of fear of reprisal. And at that time, I came out with my story because I felt I had enough knowledge to understand what was going on and that it wasn't only me. When I had admitted that I had suicidal thoughts, because there was a group of women of us that actually had a discussion in IOGC's office about this. When that story came out, he had reached out to me and said, there are several people wanting to reach out to you. Can I give them your contact? And I said, absolutely. There was a specific individual, I won't say who, but she was from across Canada. She had phoned me on a Tuesday evening, and she had told me, Letitia, you don't know who I am. I want to thank you. She said, I've been targeted from racism, and I had planned to kill myself tonight. And she said, I was walking by my living room TV and I seen a commercial, and then I seen you. And I sat down and I watched your article or your story. She said, I fell to my knees and I broke down crying because I didn't think anybody else was going through this. That's very profound for me, and it sticks out to me because she said, you saved my life. I don't think I saved her life. I think that we need each other moving forward because of the hardships that we go through. We are not crying out something in the sense of we're broken or we're not worthy of working in there. It's because of the microaggressions and it's like poking at a bear. What they do to Indigenous women is they poke at you. And they poke at you until you blow so they can discredit you, who you are. And so some of the stories are horrific across Canada. They're horrific in what I carry today. I have had to go in and out of ceremony for that, to help me carry that. So I'm strong enough to keep moving forward, to advocate for them. And it's shameless. It's shameless in their leadership, in what they think they can do to us and what they think they can get away with. And it's such a powerful institution. When you have a powerful institution discrediting and saying the same things about a group of people, it's hard to break through that. So that was the reason why I came forward. And through the stories that I collected, that is the reason why I stepped forward to create a class action lawsuit. And I opened it up to Indigenous Services Canada employees because we are all worthy of being heard. We are all worthy of our grievances being heard under the knowledge of what intergenerational trauma looks like and trauma-informed leadership.
Well, Letitia, we do thank you for sharing your story today. More to talk about here. We do just have to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Leticia Wells. Stick around. Welcome back to Face. Our guest this week is Leticia Wells. And Leticia, you know, after the reporting, again, that Brett Forrester had done on this with your stories being shared, the federal ministers responsible came out, said they were deeply disturbed and pledged, you know, thorough reviews of what's been going on. What's your reaction to that?
Unfortunately, I believe it's lip service. I'll call it what it is. The government has a long history of producing reports. An example is the TRC, MMIWG, that was delayed for a long time. And so with IOGC and coming forth, they're very familiar with what's happening internally. They choose not to deal with it. I believe that the thorough racism actually turned out to be an organizational review within IOGC. That's a vast difference between systemic racism and what's wrong within that place internally. And that's the toxic authority and no balance check to power.
You know, Letitia, there's a lot of federal government jobs specifically for Indigenous people. What would you say to other Indigenous people out there contemplating a career with the federal government?
I don't think that the government has hiring practices that allows authentic Indigenous people to get through their doors. Those positions are reserved for pretend Indians or Indians that claim to have some type of identity within them, but have no proof. It's illegal to ask a person claiming Indigenous identity within the government for proof. So there is a pattern being developed that a lot of non-Indigenous people are telling other non-Indigenous people to claim Métis status. It's an easier foot in the door.
Letitia, you know, there's the proposed class action that you're a part of and the so-called thorough review that the federal government says it's going to do. What would you like to see happen here moving forward?
Moving forward, specifically Indian oil and gas employees need immediate representation for employees. There needs to be immediate representation for Indigenous employees across Canada. I'm thinking of, I'm not sure, but a union for First Nation with trauma-informed Indigenous employees, trauma-informed resources for our people. Until you've lived through oppression, you have no idea what the violence we've endured and how hard that is to recognize within Canadian society and their institutions.
Letitia, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we do thank you for sharing your story, not just here, but you know, with Brett and everybody, an important story to get out there.
Thank you for having me.
That is all the time we do have for this week, and I do want to just send one more big shout out to Nation to Nation host Brett Forrester for his reporting on this issue. You can find more on our website. You can catch up on any episodes you may have missed here too by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks so much for being with us this week on Face to Face. We'll see you back here next week.